afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Denali webinar for April 22nd, 2015. Today we're going to be talking about the month-end checks and balance processes for Denali, the core Denali modules. We're only going to cover the core modules today because we've got a lot to cover, so we're just going to go through the core modules, which I'll go over that here in just a moment. My name is Jeremy Beislein. I am a trainer here at Cougar Mountain Software, and I'll be conducting the webinar today. Now, if you have any questions or comments, then go ahead and type those in the chat, and we will try to get to your questions as quick as we can once we get done with the webinar. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'll try to leave enough time at the end to answer all your questions here. We'll get to your questions at the end. If you're connecting through either your microphone or through phone to hear the audio, please make sure that you are muted so that we can get through our webinar today because we got a lot to cover. All right, so for our agenda today, like I said, we're only going to cover the core modules, which is going to be accounts receivable, inventory, accounts payable, and bank rec, and then we'll quickly go over the monthly financial reports in general ledger and how to make sure general ledger is all in balance too on a month-to-month basis. All right, so we're first and foremost, we're going to do is talk about as a backup. Then we'll talk about the accounts receivable month-end tasks. Then we'll talk about the month-end in inventory, month-end in accounts payable, month-end in bank rec, and the month-end and financial reports in general ledger. Some of the other modules such as payroll, purchase order, and sales we're not going to cover today in this webinar because there's not a lot of reconciliation with other modules you need to do with those, but there are some tasks that may need to be done on a periodic basis in those other modules, which we will probably have to cover at another time. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. Denali month-end tasks. First thing we want to do before we do anything at the month end is make sure you have a current backup. So you want to run your backup first before you get started on any of the month end processes. The reason for that is because some of the processes is going to be cleaning up some of the older stuff in your database, and you want to make sure that the backup is there in case you get rid of something you didn't intend to. Okay, so once you've completed your backup, then we go ahead and get started into the accounts receivable module. The accounts receivable module is going to have a couple of different things that have to be done on month end. It's probably the most extensive month end process of any of the other modules. So the first thing you do in accounts receivable is you calculate your customer's finance charges. The finance charges basically are real simple. You just click on calculate finance charges. You can do that in a separate batch or have the transactions calculated in the current batch. You can do it for a specific accounts receivable code or for all codes. Then you put your AR transaction code for the finance charge to be calculated. And then you can, if you want to, you can put a minimum finance charge such as $5. Then you would put the date of the calculation of your finance charge for the transaction to post. Now this is done first, and the reason why is because when you run your customer statements, the finance charge for any past due invoices needs to be on that statement. So when you click OK, it adds those finance charges to the current batch for all customers that are past due. Once you've completed that, you want to make sure that you post, because we didn't post anything yet. All we did is calculated the finance charges. But what's nice about that is if you wanted to change anything that you've calculated, you can open the current batch, and here's a list of all your finance charges calculated. In our demo company, we only had one. So we can edit that transaction if we'd like. We can go ahead and change the amount, or we can even delete it if we decide we don't want to calculate the finance charge for this customer for this month. But then you would make sure you post the transactions for the finance charge. All right, once we've calculated the finance charge, the next step in accounts receivable is the actual checks and balances for the accounts receivable module itself. So we want to make sure that we take care of our monthly maintenance for accounts receivable. The first thing we want to run is going to be our aged analysis report. Now the reason you want to run this report every month is because this report brings up data from the open items table in accounts receivable. So make sure you run this report every month, because a few months down the road, any items that are paid with a zero amount remaining will reflect on this report as paid, or not even show on the report at all if the items have been purged, even if you're running the report for a previous period, because the open items table no longer has those items if they've been paid in full and purged. So you want to run this report every month, and then you want to print it out and save the report, file it away somewhere, or at least save it as a PDF on your computer or on your server somewhere. So when you run the report, you age it from the end of the month. And if you do a detailed report, it's going to list each and every invoice under each and every customer. So I recommend just doing a single line report. This report shows basically a summary for each customer that has a balance due. See, as you can see, we have this is our first customer. They have a balance due of $1.11. Our second customer, 25 cents. Third customer, 5 cents. Now, our demo company doesn't have a lot of data, so these are all small balances. But this report also shows the current periods, the period one, and basically how far past due these customers are, is what this is showing. Looks like that nobody's been entering transactions in our demo company for quite some time. All of our data is period 4 or older. But this report is what you want to run every month. Run this report, either print it, or you can save this report as a PDF somewhere on your system. You can create a folder on your server where you're saving your accounts receivable aged analysis reports on a month-to-month basis. That way you can retrieve that information if you want to know what was our aged analysis 6 months ago. All right, after we've run the aged analysis report, we need to run the control report. The control report is a similar report to the aged analysis, but it is a report that is showing our aging based on the accounts receivable code, not based on the customer. And the reason we want to run this based on the code is because this is our check and balance report for the accounts receivable module in Denali. The first thing you're going to see on here, if there's any discrepancies between the open items and the customer's balance, which is in the master table, you're going to see an error if there is any of those discrepancies. The report will show those errors, and it'll list the customer that the error is having an issue in. So if the report shows any errors, what you need to do is you need to recalculate your customer's master table. And that will basically clean up those errors that you have between the two tables in the database. So again, if your control report is showing errors, you want to run the recalculate process in the accounts receivable module. And that is simply done under the options menu, table maintenance, recalculate the master table. You can do it by each AR code, or if you only have one customer on the report that's showing the error, you can select the specific customer, and then you simply click OK, and it will recalculate the customer's balance based on the open items that are still unpaid in the customer's history. But as you can see in our demo company, our report is nice and clean. There's no errors showing. So the next thing we want to do is we want to double check our balances. And that is done by reconciling the balances showing on the control report with the general ledger account. The accounts receivable control account in general ledger that's associated with the AR code. So our first AR code is A1. So let's go ahead and check the balance. Right now we've got total debits of $1.41, total credits of 0. So when we take our debits minus our credits, we have a net balance in A1 of $1.41. So to double check that, we switch back to our accounts receivable module here, bring up the AR code, bring up A1, we click edit on the code. This is the quickest way to get to the account, and here is the general ledger accounts receivable account that's associated with the A1 code. We just double click on this account and click view, and this is our balance as it's showing in general ledger right here, $1.41 debit balance. And look at that, it matches our control report, $1.41 debit. That is the method used in Denali to do your check and balances with accounts receivable. So once we've confirmed that the accounts match what general ledger is showing, then we can go ahead and print out our customer statements. Now that we've reconciled accounts receivable, we know the information on the statements will be correct. We've recalculated if needed, so everything on the statement should be correct. So we go ahead and print the customer statements. That's real simple to do. We just, in the accounts receivable module, it's just this option here. You just click that option, select the options you want on the statement, and go ahead and process those through. After we printed statements, then we purge the open items. Now the purging of open items gets rid of any items in the open items table under each customer that has a zero balance remaining. So all invoices that are paid in full, they get purged out of the open items. All payments that have been applied to invoices, so there's no amount remaining, no unapplied amount on the payment, that also gets purged. So to purge our open items, that's under the period end option. It's the first option here, and we just simply click Purge Open Items, and we just do that for all customers. Now we want to select the purge date. If you're running statements for March, you're going to purge open items at the end of February. And that gets rid of all open items up through the end of February. Any items since February 28th will still be in the table, so the next time you run statements, those items will be there. That's important to show the current month's activity on the statement. That's why you don't want to purge items in the current month. You only want to purge up to the end of the previous month. And we always have our big warning, make sure there's a backup before processing, because we are basically purging data from the database when we do this. Now the items will still be in the history, so there's no problem there. We just need to get rid of them out of the open items table, so they're not going to show up on the statement. So your monthly statements don't just keep getting bigger and bigger every month. It's only going to show the current month's activity on each statement. The item that doesn't have a zero balance will still be, it will not be purged. Any items that have not been paid in full or any payments that have not been applied to invoices in full will not be purged when you run this process. So they will continue to show up on the statements until they are paid in full. And that's it for accounts receivable. So that basically does your checks and balances, makes sure everything is balanced with AR, cleans up your open items for the month, and then you're ready to move on. So our next one is the inventory module. In the inventory module, the only thing we really need to do is do our check and balance with general ledger to make sure that the inventory codes match the general ledger inventory asset accounts in general ledger. So that is done with the stock value report and the control report. Now our stock value report's important to run just like the aging report in accounts receivable, because that gives you a stock value of items you have on hand up to the current month. Anytime those items change, that stock value report is going to change as well. You notice there isn't an option to select the date on this report. This report shows you what is the stock value as of right now, as of what we have right now when we run the report. That's why it's important to run this report on a monthly basis. We'll skip zero quantity because that'll make it easier to see. And then save this report, either file it away or save it as a PDF so that you know what the stock value was at the end of each month. And this right here is a condensed report, so it's showing the stock value of each one of our stock items. This report would probably be better to save it. Let's see, that's our AR report. To save it as a PDF, the reason why is because this report is going to list each and every stock item. If you've got hundreds or thousands of items, you may want to save that as a PDF instead of printing out hundreds of pages. But you want to at least look at the report just to make sure that it's got the information that you need. And you have other options. You can run it for specific items, you can run it for specific inventory codes instead of all inventory codes, however you want to do that. Skipping the zero quantity though will minimize it. Basically any items that have a zero quantity will not be on the report. Okay, so once you've run that report, then the next report we want to run is going to be our control report. Here we go, the control report. This is the report that shows a total balance of each inventory code. So this report does not list each item. Just like in accounts receivable, the first thing this report is going to show us is any discrepancies between the open items table, which in inventory that is our cost quantity table is what they call that. If there's a discrepancy in the cost quantity table with the total balance in the master table for the item, you're going to see that as an error on this report, and it'll be listed by item for any items that have errors. But as you can see, this report tells us no errors were detected. So right now, right off the bat, we know that our tables in inventory do balance and match each other because there are no errors, so we're good there. However, if there are errors detected, then you'll need to recalculate the inventory. Now, inventory gives you the option of recalculating the master table or recalculating the cost quantity table if you know the master table is correct. So those are the options in recalculating. Go ahead and recalculate if needed to get the two tables to match so that the cost quantity matches the inventory master table. But no errors were detected, so therefore we can move on and reconcile our inventory module with the inventory accounts in general ledger. So that's our next step. So what we do is we look at each inventory code. Our first inventory code we have in our demo company is called Access. I can get my cursor to work there. Oh well, that's good enough, I guess. So Access is our first inventory code. This is the total stock value we have on hand for all items under this inventory code. $285,946 and 59/100ths of a cent. Inventory does go out to 4 decimal places on the dollar amounts. So keep that in mind as you're reconciling with general ledger. So now what we do is we open the inventory code just like we did in accounts receivable under the AR code. Here's Access. This is our inventory control account. So it should have a balance of $285,946, and if we round it, it should be 1 penny. So let's double check our balance in general ledger and take a look. And look at that, there it is. So our inventory matches what general ledger is showing for that inventory code. And you would do this for each of your inventory codes. So we have another inventory code here. You check the general ledger account for that inventory code to make sure it matches as well. And that's all you do in inventory. There's no statements to run or purge open items, anything like that. We don't have to worry about that in inventory. So all we do is just check we print out our stock value report for the month end, and then we check the control report to make sure that there's no errors and that it matches our general ledger. So moving on, we go on to accounts payable. In the accounts payable module, it's a similar process to inventory. All we're going to do is checks and balance, check our reports, make sure everything's good, make sure it matches the AP accounts in general ledger, our AP liability accounts. Accounts payable also has an open items. So we'll get to that, and we can purge those if we want as well. So the first thing we're going to run in accounts payable is our aging report. So in accounts payable, under reports, we run the aging report for the month end. Again, this report brings the information from the open items. So make sure when you run this report that you do this at the end of each month and you save it as a PDF or print it out and file it. Otherwise, you will not have the month information once those items are paid. As you pay off vendor invoices, these numbers are going to change on this report. So this is what we want to make sure. We run this at the end of each month if you need to keep that for each month, if you need an aging report for each of your vendors. So our aging report, since we ran it single line, it just shows a total for each vendor that we currently owe at the end of the month. And it also shows how far past due based on what period we're in. Hey, look at that. We've got one that we entered some information in from last month. So we're in period 1 there. And then at the bottom we have our grand totals here. Grand total due is the combined total of all of our accounts to all vendors. Okay, so once we've run that report, then we go on to our control report. And the control report in accounts payable is just like the others. First of all, it's going to show any errors. If the open items table does not match the master table, then you're going to see errors. However, if we go down through our report here, and all 3 of our accounts payable codes do not have any errors listed, so therefore we're good. We don't need to recalculate. But if you need to recalculate, just like the other modules, that is done under the vendor master menu here. Under the options menu, there we go, table maintenance. All modules, the recalculation is done under the table maintenance under the options menu, with the exception of bank rec. And we'll talk about that in just a moment here. So if we have an error showing on the control report, we must recalculate to get our master table and our open items table to match. And just like the others, we just go ahead and select. You can do it by vendor if you only want to recalculate one vendor. If we only have one vendor showing, we can do that. Or you can just do start to end and recalculate all. We click OK, that will go ahead and recalculate. But our control report is clean. We have no errors on the control report. So now we need to match each accounts payable code with general ledger to make sure that our numbers are correct. So our first code is KW. The total balance in KW is $7.20 for all vendors under the KW code. So we'll go up to options under accounts payable codes. We'll bring up our KW code here. And here's the accounts payable liability account for the KW code. This account should show a credit balance of $7.20. And there it is. Our credit balance in accounts payable, or in the general ledger for this liability account, matches the accounts payable control report. So therefore, we reconcile with general ledger for this code. And then you do the same with the other AP codes as needed. Now keep in mind, if you have more than one AP code going to the same liability account in general ledger, you have to add those balances together to get the general ledger balance. That also applies in accounts receivable for AR codes and in inventory for your inventory codes as well. All right, so moving on. Once we've reconciled AP with general ledger, then that's it. Accounts payable is done for month end. So you just run your aging report, your control report, recalculate if needed, reconcile with general ledger. That's all we got to do in accounts payable. This last option in accounts payable is purge open items. That is not really necessary since you don't run vendor statements like you do customer statements in accounts receivable. But it is an option to kind of keep your open items table nice and clean. So it is recommended to run the open items purge every month in accounts payable as well, or at least periodically from time to time. That way when you do run that aging report, all the zero items will be purged out so they won't need to be on that report. Again, the purge open items only purges items with a zero balance up through the purge date that you put on the request to purge. And again, it always warns us, make sure we have a backup first, but we did that before we started, so we're good to go there. So our next one is bank rec. I know we're getting short on time, so I'm going to try to go through these as quick as I can, but the bank rec module is real simple, so this one will go real quick. With bank rec, basically you're going to reconcile your bank statement every month. When you reconcile the bank statement, if the previous balance on your bank reconciliation window in Denali does not match the opening balance on the bank statement, if those are wrong, we may need to recalculate the bank account balance in the bank rec module. So if that does not match your opening balance on the bank statement, then we run the recalculate. Now in BankRec, to recalculate, it's not done under the options menu. It's done under the bank account menu here at the top, and then we just rebuild the bank account total. This is real simple. We just click on that option, and then we select what bank account are we rebuilding the total, and then we enter what the opening balance on the statement shows here and click OK. And that just rebuilds that bank account total from that opening balance, and then any outstanding items that have not cleared yet, have not been marked as cleared yet, will be added and subtracted so that it gives us the correct balance in the BankRec module to match what the bank is showing. After we've recalculated, then the last step is just to reconcile with general ledger. Now in BankRec, we've made that real easy for you. To reconcile with general ledger, all we have to do is click on Working with Accounts to open the account maintenance window, bring up the account that we're working in, and we do this after we've completed our reconcile of the bank statement, and then we just check the current balance, which reconciles with the bank, and the current GL balance. This is what our general ledger is showing that we have in this bank account. If those two numbers do not match, you'll either need to make a journal entry, or you'll have to check your outstanding items and see if there's one entered that doesn't belong in BankRec. But most likely it's going to be a journal entry in the general ledger to fix those numbers so that they match. These two numbers should always match here in the BankRec module. And that's all we have to do to reconcile with general ledger. Just make sure that those two numbers match in the account setup and you're good to go. All right, so that takes care of BankRec, and that takes care of all of our core modules except for the main module, of course, which is general ledger. In the general ledger, to make sure that general ledger balances, the first thing we want to do is we want to run our trial balance. The trial balance report in general ledger is going to show us if we have any out of balance issues. So we run the trial balance, and you can run it just for the month only that you're in. So for example, we are in April, so if we're running it for March, that's going to be on my fiscal calendar, period 16. So we run the trial balance just for period 16. It's going to show us if we have any problems. And I'm not showing any information because we don't have any transactions posted in period 16. So let's go from period 0 to 16. This should definitely show us. This will be our ending balance if we go from period 0 to 16. Remember, the trial balance only shows totals for the periods that you put on that request that we just entered. So if you want to see the account balance ending that period, always start with period 0 and then go to period 16. So here's our trial balance. These are the account balances for all of our accounts, and at the bottom of the report it'll show total debits and total credits. If they don't match, then it will show us that there is an out of balance, like we have on our display here. We'll see an out of balance if they don't match. Now if we're out of balance, we may need to recalculate, just like we did in the other modules. In general ledger, if your general ledger is thrown out of balance, we just need to recalculate the period tables to get that back in balance again. And to recalculate, just like the other modules, it's done under the options menu in table maintenance, recalculate the period tables. We can do it by account number, or we can just do all account numbers and click OK. To get the trial balance to balance, we want to do all account numbers. Once that's done, that should correct any discrepancies. It basically takes all of the entries that posted in the audit trail and recalculates the period table for those reports. And then we should have a balanced trial balance at that point. If we're still out of balance after recalculating, then we need to start doing some research and digging to figure out why we're out of balance. That means that something actually posted to an account without posting the opposing entry to the opposing account. We had a debit that didn't match a credit somewhere. So we have to go into our audit trail and we have to try to figure out what it is that got thrown out of balance. Now if we do this on a month-to-month basis, this is why we make this part of our month-end tasks. If we run that trial balance and do this every month, then it will be a lot easier to find our out of balance. Now we do have another webinar coming up on June 3rd that goes into detail of how to find our out of balance, so I'm not going to go into detail on that today. But basically that's what we'll need to do, is research that, figure it out, and then fix it. Now once we've got everything fixed and everything is balanced, now we're ready to start running our month-end financial statements. In General Ledger, the first one we look at is our income statement. This tells us what have we made in our income at the end of the month. How much income did we make this month? You can run it for the month or you can run it for all periods up to the end of that month. So let's say we're in period 6, which is going to be June of last year. We're in period 6. I just got informed that we are running short on time, so we'll have to quickly do this. You've got several options to run. We just go ahead and run our period. This is going to show us just period 6 income, if this is the period we're in. What you want to do is do this on a monthly basis for each period that you are in. This will show period, and then it'll show year to date. This is our profit and loss statement. That option is selected here under the report type, profit and loss. You can run any of these reports in the income statement. Same with our balance sheet. Balance sheet will show the condition of the company, the financial condition of your company. You run that for whatever period you're in. All right, so we run all of our financials, our income statement, different options there, profit and loss. We run our balance sheet statement. That shows our total assets, liabilities, and net worth. And that gives us all of our reports. And that is your month-end tasks in Denali for all of our modules. Now again, there's some other tasks that may need to be done in the other modules such as sales and purchase order, but those are optional, and there is some notes in the chat that George put in that gives you some helpful advice on how to run some of those tasks. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and switch over to our questions here. We have one from Rosemary. Where can we view the video after this session? We'll make sure to send out an email to everybody where to review that. Usually you would just go to cougarmountain.com. That's cougarmtn.com. And then there's a link under the resources menu to click on the videos and webinars. And that'll take you to where to go there. So yeah, you guys have been really good. It's been a real pleasure working with you today. Be sure to tune in next month on May 6th. We're going to be doing a webinar discussing the new features in Denali 5.1. And the following month on June 3rd, that is the webinar we're going to talk about how to find your out of balance if you get thrown out of balance in the general ledger. So if you're interested in how to figure that out, which I didn't go into today, if your trial balance is out of balance even after recalculating, then be sure to come back on June 3rd and we'll show you how to do that. All right, be sure to check up the website for follow-up, cougarmountain.com. That's cougarmtn, mountain is shortened in that, .com. You can also give us a call at tech support or email us if you have any questions or comments. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.